This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight now, we bring you a discussion on Indo-Nepal relations over the year. The participants are Atul Aneja, International Affairs Expert, and Manas Pratim Bhuyan, Journalist.
Mr. Aneja, the Nepalese Prime Minister began a 3-day visit to India yesterday in his first bilateral visit after taking charge as Prime Minister of Nepal in July for a 5th stint. And today he held extensive talks with our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, reviewing the full spectrum of the bilateral agenda covering political, economic, trade, energy security, and development issues. A major focus of the talk was to boost connectivity as the two sides unveiled the first cross-border railway connection, and another area of focus was power sector. Both sides released a vision document to further expand cooperation in the power sector. So how do you see the overall outcome of the talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Nepalese Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deuba today?
I think this is a moment when the India-Nepal relationship is being rebooted to a new level. As you are aware, there were problems and hiccups in our relationship for the last few years. But finally, I think what has happened is that both sides have realized, especially Nepalese side has now understood the importance of the special relationship between India and Nepal. And therefore, each side is now willing to restart the relationship with a big bang. And I think coming of Prime Minister Deuba, a veteran politician who has been to India several times, and the fact that this is his first visit itself shows that the Nepalese side is going ahead with reviving its relationship with full vigor and with full energy. And you also see, Manas, what you said, that the spectrum of topics which were discussed today covers such a wide range, and it means that we are looking at reviving the relationship in a comprehensive manner without leaving any side of whether it's economic, whether it's energy, whether it's trade, whether it's culture. So I think it's a 360-degree attempt to take India-Nepal relations to a new height. It's a very promising restart, and since new agreements are signed, new foundations are being laid to keep it at that level and also modernize the relationship, which we can talk when we discuss connectivity or digital payments, some specific interesting aspects which came up in the talks today.
Yeah, you briefly mentioned about hiccups in ties actually. I mean, there was some kind of turbulence because of the boundary road that erupted in 2020. The ties came under severe strain after Nepal published a new political map in 2020 that showed 3 Indian territories as part of Nepal. And following the row, India also reacted very sharply, calling it a unilateral act and cautioned Kathmandu that such artificial endorsement of territorial claims will not be acceptable to India. So since then, we have seen several visits. At the end of 2020, our Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla visited Nepal. That visit was followed by then Nepalese Foreign Minister's visit to India. And both sides have been resolving to address this boundary issue through talks. And in today's dialogue, Nepalese Prime Minister Deuba actually asked Prime Minister Modi to establish a bilateral mechanism to resolve the boundary issue amicably. And at a media briefing, we heard Foreign Secretary Shringla saying that the general understanding between the two sides was to address the issue in a responsible manner and in the spirit of close bilateral neighborly ties between the two countries. And at the same time, he emphasized that the politicization of the boundary issue should be avoided. So how do you see this new resolve the boundary issue in an amicable manner in an environment of friendly relations and dialogue? And in the press conference, Shringla also cited India's talks with Bangladesh in successfully resolving the maritime and land border disputes. We successfully resolved the disputes with Bangladesh, and that was cited as a model by the Foreign Secretary for resolution of the boundary issue with Nepal. So how do you see this approach of Nepal and India to address the boundary question in an atmosphere of close neighborly relations?
Manas, let's put things in context. When the relationship between India and Nepal nosedived, it was for several reasons. And there was one important factor, which was the China factor, which got because we had the problem with in 2015 with the Nepalese. Unfortunately, I think the Nepalese then communist government was miffed with India and went straight to China, even when it came to energy supplies. The Chinese, of course, came in and saw the strategic location of Nepal and promised them integration with their Belt and Road Initiative. Some ports were identified in China, so very far away from the Nepalese border, and were frankly unviable, but they went ahead and signed that. But I think over time, what the Nepalese realized was that it is best to balance their relationship between these two heavyweights. And especially at a time when India-China relations were going south, Nepal realized that it would not like to get crossfire into these big powers. I think that was the context and also the complexion of the particular government in Nepal, which triggered this sort of a friction between India and Nepal. But there has been a 360-degree change in that. We have a new government coming in Nepal, and which is far more, has very deep roots in India and the Indian political system. So that balance has now been restored. And that is what we see reflected in the revisiting of this border problem, which former Prime Minister Oli had raised in Parliament, which had passed that. So that phase is over. So there is a new will to resolve the thorny issues, and border being one of them. Now, I think we've taken a step forward. Not only are we willing to resolve, but we actually have a role model for that. And that's where Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla comes out with his Bangladesh example, that here is a concrete example of two South Asian neighbors, which again have had a patchy relationship, not always smooth, despite the fact that India played a seminal role in Bangladesh's independence from Pakistan. But nevertheless, there is a model of how that particular, both on the maritime plane and on the land border plane, there is an example of how these two countries managed to resolve. So that is the precedent which is being shown to Nepal. If India and Bangladesh can do so, there is no reason in the similar spirit of goodwill and give and take that India and Nepal can't do it. I think they've moved really forward on modalities, or in the same sense, the model to pursue the resolution of the boundary issue. And on top of that is the sea change in political thinking. That look, you're not looking at the negatives now, you're on a positive track. That is both India and Nepal. So you're looking at commonality, and therefore there is a political will to go ahead and encash or to implement the template which was identified and shown by the Foreign Secretary. So I think now things can move pretty rapidly on the India-Nepal front coming from this visit. And there were so many other things, for example, digital payments. The RuPay will now be valid in Nepal for consumers, which essentially means that on digital payments, again, there is a road to integration between India and Nepal. And that's very, very important. It can spur a lot of activity. Payments are, once they're smooth, tourism, investments, everything can be moved forward by something like that. Then I think one very important aspect is the civilizational connectivity, which is unique. Nepal and China, for example, don't share that kind. The Ramayan route, which the Prime Minister talked about, the railway connectivity from sites which are rooted in our civilizational history. I think that gives India and Nepal a very, very special dimension, which goes way beyond the economic and geopolitical issues which we have been discussing right now. So the relationship has actually tapped into its roots right now with this visit. And nourished by that, then we go on and identify specific projects based on that affinity, a sense of identity, and a sense of bonding. So there are way too many dimensions which, as I was reading before the program, which are sort of getting unveiled and surfacing now between India and Nepal. And that's a great sign. If we continue this momentum, then this will take off. We have other projects like BBN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal. You see, now, for example, Nepal is a landlocked country. Now, the Chinese are offering them ports which are unviable. I mean, it is in Gansu province in Xinjiang or in that direction. So, instead of that, if the Nepalese can use not just our ports, which is Kolkata and others on the east coast, but if they can access Bangladeshi ports like Chittagong or Cox's Bazar, or the new ones like Matilbari, the deep water port which is coming up with there. So I think that will ease a lot of pressure and provide a channel for trade from Nepal under a bigger scheme where not only it's bilateral between India and Nepal, but also includes Bhutan, Bangladesh, and then who knows, this is part of the old Asian, not the old, but the Asian highway which is being built. And that brings Nepal in connectivity way forward towards Thailand and Southeast Asia. Nepal gets integrated into India's Act East policy framework and takes its connectivity leads finally to Da Nang in Vietnam. So there is much more to this visit than bilateral. Connectivity and the roadmap for connectivity looks far, and it's something which is completely unprecedented. So I just hope that we move step by step and move in this bigger direction where Nepal is integrated much more strongly in the global economy and politics.
Yeah, you very rightly analyzed, because Prime Minister Modi, in his comments, he said that friendly ties between India and Nepal are unique, and such a relationship is not seen anywhere else in the world. It's a big statement. And today's outcomes actually reflect that. Modi also said India has been and will continue to remain a firm companion in Nepal's journey for peace, prosperity and development. So it's a big assurance that India has given to Nepal that whatever you do, we will be just always supporting you. So in the context of specific outcomes, how do you see these three specific development projects that were unveiled today? One is the railway link, cross-border broad gauge railway link between India and Nepal, between Jayanagar in Bihar and Kurthai in Nepal. Then the inauguration of 90-kilometer long 132 kV Solu corridor transmission line and substation built under India's line of credit, and third is unveiling of the RuPay card, payment card for Nepal. So these are very significant projects that were unveiled. Besides, both sides also agreed to expedite progress in implementation of the Pancheshwar multi project. That's a very important project actually, and both sides have been working on it. The detailed project report is being now finalized. So overall, whatever these two prime ministers spoke in their statements after the talks, and the statement that the Minister of External Affairs has released. So what kind of momentum you see for India-Nepal ties, particularly after a spell of uncertainty and strain? How do you see the overall big picture for India and Nepal to further boost their already close neighborly friendly ties for decades?
One is the two specific things. One, what you spoke about is integration. Integration in the energy field. For example, the specific Pancheshwar project which you mentioned. So that's one. Oil and gas, that's another. But I think apart from integration is the dovetailing of India-Nepal relationship in a bigger picture of the rise of Asia. I think that is a very important element which is there in the backdrop while India and Nepal. The vision is much bigger now. That once India and Nepal join together, then Nepal gets integrated with India's Northeast, and India's Northeast is very much part of the Act East policy which goes towards ASEAN. So we are no longer looking Nepal in a myopic way. We are looking Nepal, if you look at the big picture, as part of a much larger regional integration project, which comes through connectivity, which comes through people-to-people exchanges, which comes through specific projects. So when you have Pancheshwar projects, etc., it's just not going to be just India and Nepal. If there is a surplus of energy, and if we can integrate energy coming from Nepal, a Prime Minister made specific reference that it is heartening to see Nepal export power to India. And it is natural because of the hydropower resources which Nepal has. And given a smaller population, it has surplus energy. So it sort of gets pooled in India. And you have another line of energy coming into India from Bhutan, hydropower. So if India becomes a hub of that, then it can export power further beyond the consumption of India and India's north. And that opens the door for further integration of grids, joining it with Bangladesh, joining it further into the larger ASEAN platform. So this is part of a much bigger web, or it can be part of a much bigger web of energy distribution on a regional scale. And that too hydro, which means basically renewable energy, which is a thrust of the government of India. You also saw Nepal joining the Solar Alliance by the way, Manas. So that again is an international project. So Nepal integrates into a much bigger international project. And then focus on renewables is always there. So you see the modernization, digital payments, clean energy, regional integration. All these are strands which come out of and opportunities which come out from today's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Aneja, for your detailed overview about India-Nepal relations and the outcome of today's talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Nepalese counterpart, Sher Bahadur Deuba. Thank you so very much.
You're very welcome, Manas.
You were listening to a discussion on Indo-Nepal relations over the year. The participants were Atul Aneja, International Affairs expert, and Manas Pratim Bhuyan, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.